here I am, the weather's closing in, we're low on ammunition, got casualties, some of them serious, and we got to get it out. And I've got 500 meters of rice paddy to cross. So I had engineers blow down some trees to make an LZ, brought in helicopters, 840s, to take out the wounded, and they were coming in. They aborted. And I got on, what the hell's going on? Oh, you're taking fire down there. I stood out in the middle of the LZ, landing zone. And I said, you SOBs, I'm standing out here, and I'm taking fire. I got dead and wounded. You bunch of, you better land, or I'm going to shoot at you. Words to that effect. Well, in senior year, they bring all the boys in the auditorium, and career day, they called it. And they had recruiters from all the services. And the Army got up, recruiter, and started to talk, and there's catcalls and whistles in the audience, and the Navy and the Air Force the same way. We were rather rowdy. This Marine gunny got up and slapped the table and said, no one in this room I want in my Marine Corps. You're unmotivated, undisciplined. Then he began to chew out the faculty in the back of the room for letting us get out of here, picked up his stuff and walked off the stage. And at the end of the assembly, when we were walking out, he was just folding up his table, and I went over to him and I said, I have a few questions for you. And so I asked him, and he talked to me about the Platoon Leaders Class program. So that's how it happened. But here was a guy that got up there, mission-oriented, wouldn't take any crap from anybody, and disciplined. I said, boy, you know what? I'd like to be a guy like that, So he made a big impression on me. I was active in Boy Scouting, and I had leadership roles all the time. And I enjoyed and was comfortable leading people to get things done. And I figured, I could continue like this in the Marine Corps.
And so then once you graduated from St. Anselm, same day, commissioned a second lieutenant. Then where were you assigned?
Well, then I went to Quantico to the basic school, officers' basic school, which is 6 months. And that prepares, all Marine officers are infantry first. Everyone's trained to be a platoon commander. And then at the end of your 6 weeks, you go, I went artillery. Some people go tanks, some people go air, some people go supply, admin, that type of stuff. So 6 weeks of a basic school. But it didn't end up 6 weeks, because in November, you'll remember, was the Cuban crisis. And I remember standing in the basic school up on the Flying Bridge. We had one TV in the Hawkins room down below. And when Kennedy gave his speech, it was very, it got our attention. But leading up to that day, 10 o'clock in the morning, over the loudspeaker, everybody that's got the bayonet that goes on the M14, report to the Armory. Turn it in. The next hour, everyone's got the cleaning tools, because we all didn't have them. We spread them around. Next one was, everybody got gas masks. Turn them in. Then they said, everybody with O positive blood, report to the infirmary. So we said, what the heck's going on? Well, then we found out Cuba, and then the speech. And the next day, we started training 24/7. They did away with all the, knife and fork stuff and some of the history and some of the drill. I was taking Spanish. Someone else had French and German. They did away with all that. Everything was tactics. And we trained morning, noon, and night. I qualified in rifle range on a Sunday. We're supposed to graduate 6 months, would have been February. We graduated before Christmas. Even though the crisis settled down, it was put in motion, we're going to need second lieutenants and where we were all going. So rather than stop and do that all over again, we graduated early. So I ended up in the 3rd Marine Division about 6 weeks before I normally would have been there.
So you arrived there in December of 1965.
December 1965, yeah.
And Operation Harvest Moon is happening. Explain the unit you're with and what you were doing.
Well, I was assigned to Echo Battery, 2nd Battalion, 12th Marines. And they were in support of 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, hell in a helmet. And I checked into the battery area south of Da Nang, stationary position, and spent a couple days in the battery area, working in the fire direction center and down on the guns, and sort of just getting acclimated. It was hotter than hell. But the first sergeant got me on a sandbag detail every day. Officers and staff NCOs, an hour after dinner every night, sandbags. You fill your own sandbags and you put them around your tent. Not going to have troops do that. So I was part of that every night. And then I went over to 9th Marines. They were going, had a big patrol going down on the Anderson Trail. And I replaced Bobby Hamill as the forward observer. He'd been injured, and he was still in the sling. So, my job was to learn what's going on in Vietnam. So they sent me out as a forward observer. And I went with 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, and reported over to 9th Marine headquarters. And we were on patrol with the ARVN forces. And we were down near the Anderson Trail where one of the first big ambushes took part in Vietnam. For those history buffs will remember that. And we were patrolling with the ARVNs, and we got a call, report to the rear immediately. Report back to your unit. Something. So we do an about face and get back to the 9th Marines area. And they said, you're going out on Operation Harvest Moon to relieve a company from the 2nd Battalion, 7th Marines, who had been shot up and had immersion foot. So we loaded up on H-34 helicopters and up into the Quezon Mountains we go. We land and get off, and members of, it was either Echo or Fox Company, I don't remember, of 2-7, get on for the retrograde. And we got our whole company in, and theirs out. And then we fell in, and I was briefed, and our position to march, and pretty much of a battalion movement through the mountains. They'd been out there for about 3 weeks. So, and they'd seen some combat. Some people in Echo were pretty well shot up. So I heard some shooting next couple of days. I didn't think, we got one prisoner, which we had to bring along. And then we're coming down out of the Quezon Mountains, and it was almost a day, almost going to end the operation. And I remember the day, the 17th of December, we had stopped overnight, and it raining like hell. And it was cold. I don't think I've been that cold in my life. And I remember being under a poncho with my radio operator, Pat Iconato from Chicago. And when we weren't on watch, we cuddled in that underneath. I've never been so cold in my life. And he is too. We tell that story. I've never been so close to a guy in my life. We just hugged each other, to keep warm. And then the next day, it cleared off, and we're coming back out. And it was going to be finishing the operation, really. It was the last day of the operation. And we were coming down breaking out of the Quezon Mountains, and coming down where our rice paddies were. And we were rear security of a battalion movement. So 3 companies had already were ahead of us. We were the last in Charlie, as rear end security. And I heard some shooting up front, and didn't think too much of it. And then all hell broke loose. We got part of the shooting. They ambushed. At that point, they were ambushing the whole regiment, the whole battalion at a time. One company from 2-7 had made it through Kifu, and we're on the outskirts going east, probably about 4 or 5 hours from Route 1. where the operation was going to terminate. 2 companies and headquarters were in Kifu, and we were the rear element. Well, Captain Gormley, my company commander from New Hampshire, and he'd already been crossing the dike. He probably was 75 meters out from me. I had not left some cover yet. And with his radio operator, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. Our whole company was ambushed. And they picked out Captain Gormley, walking with a map in his hand, 45 on his hip, and a whip antenna behind him. And they know he's the commander. And in communist doctrine, you take out the leadership of a unit, and then most units, no one does anything. Like in Russian forces, there's no sergeants and corporals and chain of command. It's officers tell them to do anything. If an officer's not around to tell them to do something, they don't do anything. So that's the way the Vietnamese operated, North Vietnamese. So they picked out Captain Gormley and whoom. I think it was a rocket that got him, but we were being mortared all the time. First time I'd ever been shot at. I hit the deck. And then I look up from underneath my helmet, and yeah, I'm scared. Anybody says they're not scared when they get shot at is lying or smoking dope. I mean, and the main thing is for an officer is how you control that fear. Because you don't want your troops to see you fearful, because then they're more fearful. So I looked up, and I could see all these young lieutenants, all these young Marines look at me saying, what are we going to do? They didn't know my name. I'd only been with them 5 days. But I had a silver bar on my collar, and there's an officer. He's got to tell us what to do. He's going to lead us. Well, the first thing I did is get with Icon Otto, and we called in some fire missions. And we fired, we were pinned down on our right, I remember, right flank by machine guns. And they were pretty well dug in. So that was the first fire mission. And the battery was located over here, and we're here, so they had to fire over us. And I called in a fire mission on this trench line, because they had us pinned down pretty good. And but we took some shrapnel in our position. So I talked to the battery, on the radio, and I told them, they said, this is old ammunition. This goes back to Korea. And the weather's bad. So you take bad ammunition and weather that's not clear, the meteorology and the age of the fire, of the powder and stuff, it's not going to be as exact as it should be, even if you're spot on. So I decided that I wasn't going to fire over our head anymore. I only took on targets between me and the battery. It's pretty scary when the first fire mission you call in combat wounds some of your own people. Not bad. I mean, they had little pieces of shrapnel, and they had a lot. Of course, when it rains on them, they over-exaggerated. I find out later. So I didn't do any more there. And I called in fire missions over here. And then I see Doc West from Chicago go running by me. The skipper's down out there. And then I look out on the dike, and I see a pile of people. And then I realize that's the skipper, of course, his radio operator, and maybe a security guy or two. And then I see McLean, my scout sergeant from Florida, running by to protect the dock. Well, the dock gets shot 3 or 4 times getting out there. McLean gets shot 2 or 3 times. Now here I got scout sergeant. I see my scout sergeant's down. I mean, really down. He's shot real bad. The corpsman's down. The commander's out there. The radio's out there. And all these people want me to tell them what to do. So I ran out and picked up Captain Gormley and brought him back and into a little covered position. He shot up pretty bad. We talked, and I remember he took his wallet. He said, "Take my wallet out of my pocket." And it was stuffed with a lot of money. He said, "Make sure my wife gets that." And he died in my arms. So here I've got the dead the dead commander, Captain Paul Gormley. He just died in my arms. And of course, everybody's, So I ran out and I took the radio off the dead operator, Savoy. And I ran back and I put it on myself because my radio operator's got our radios on. He's calling the artillery. So I get on there. I didn't know the battalion commander's call, so I just got on there and whatever their Dixie Diner, I think it was. Dixie Diner 6. Dixie Diner 6. This is whatever my call sign was. He gets on and I said, "Sir, I'm the forward observer. We've never met. Captain Gormley is dead. It looks like I'm taking over the company." He says, "Where are the other officers?" I said, "They're all up there in the alligators. They're in their own firefight. They got their own battle going. And I'm here with headquarters, and we got to do something, so I'm taking over." He says, "Well, it sounds like you know what you're doing, Lieutenant. Make sure everyone knows that you're in charge." Because, as I said, they didn't even know my name, Lieutenant. Now I'm the skipper. Most revered title, I think, if anybody in the Marine Corps is when they call you skipper, because that means you're the boss. You're in charge. So now I'm and you got to remember now. So I started telling them what I needed to be done. I'd only been 3.5 years out of basic training. Remember what I told you? Every lieutenant's trained as a platoon commander first. So I knew basically the tactics to be used. And we started doing things. So the first thing was get those machine guns that had us pinned down. So I organized a couple fire teams that said, "Go get them." Well, they all got shot up. That turned into our next ones. Go get them. And they were not successful. So the next squad I got together, I said, "Follow me," and I led them. And we got them. And we come out pretty good. But if those first fire teams had, knocked it down a little, we probably would have been successful. We took them out. No, we took out one of them. And then we pulled back, and we were still getting shot at. And I said, I can't afford to get anybody else hurt, shot up, taking those machine guns out. So then General Platt, this is hours into it now. General Platt, the task force commander, got up on, he's up on a helicopter, flying. I could hear jets up there, but it was overcast. So I know they're going to bring jets. He says, "I got 2 armed helicopters. Can you use them?" I said, "Hell yeah." So he turns the helicopters over to me, and I went up on this little knoll, and I had someone come up with me, the rocket launcher guy, and of course they were with the headquarters. Thank God they were there. And so they went up on this knoll with me, and I took the rocket launcher. And again, remembering how I did all this in basic school 3 years ago. And I shot at the machine gun that was still shooting at us. And of course, then they put their fire towards us. And I took another round, and I got it in there, and I told the pilots, "You just hit where I'm with a," and then I picked out a couple more places that fire was coming from. And they came right in. Boy, they took them out. So at this point, they knocked out those machine guns. So it gave us a little more maneuver ability. We could move around people, and I didn't have everybody hunkered down. And then either the weapon malfunctioned or ran out of rounds. I don't remember. And there was still, and I still got these. They still Skipper, we still got rounds. They tell me this, I don't remember this. I took my arms like this and I pointed at the targets, and the pilots flew down the axis of my arms at the targets. I don't remember doing that.
Are you exposed to enemy fire?
Oh, yes. Oh, hell yeah. The rounds are landing all around it. Well, I got a call from the battalion commander. He said, you've got to come out. We can't come get you. We're in one hell of a firefight in here, and everybody's committed. We can't come get you. So you're on your own. Whew. Here I am. The weather's closing in. We're low on ammunition. Got casualties. Some of them serious. And we got to get it out. And I've got 500 meters of rice paddy to cross. So I had engineers blow down some trees to make an LZ. Brought in helicopters, 834s, to take out the wounded. And they were coming in. They aborted. And I got on, what the hell's going on? Oh, you're taking fire down there. I says, I got very vocal. And so I said, well, I can't come in, it's too much fire. I went out and stood in the middle, and this is another one I don't remember. My regimental commander told me about this. I stood out in the middle of the LZ, landing zone, and I said, you SOBs, I'm standing out here, and I'm taking fire. I got dead and wounded. You bunch of, you better land, or I'm going to shoot at you. Words to that effect. I got a little lesson in radio procedure later on by a commo, and you know what I told him he could do with it. But they came in and they landed. And we got the dead and the wounded out, all of them. So we didn't have to carry anybody. So then I got all this ground to cover. And so I had the engineers blow up all unusable equipment. And then I had everybody even put their packs in a pile, and they burned them. Now, they didn't want to do that, but I told them, you got to be light. We got 500 meters to go. And you may get shot, someone's got to pick you up. Someone else may get shot, you got to pick them up. You don't want that extra weight. I want you to be alive when you get across there. And I was very blunt with them and called a spade. And so then we started. The only way to go out was right where our headquarters was, to get on that dike. And the dike was had two lanes that they could bring a cart on. So I said, okay, the old fire maneuver I learned in basic school. Set up a fire here, set up fire in the village, and then you leapfrog. So I had asked Colonel Lutter to set up a base of fire, let me know when you're ready, and we're going to start breaking out. And they were to fire to the left and the right, where fire was coming from. And started fire teaming and fire teaming. I said, it was never going to work. It'd be St. Patrick's Day before we get everybody out doing it that way. So I said, we're going to go squads at a time. That's 13. And when you start, no leap and frog. You run as fast as you can. And the only time you stop, someone gets shot, stop, you pick them up. So I did squad at a time. When the first squad was out about 20 yards or 1/3 of the way, the next squad, the next squad, the next squad. And we broke out. And if someone got shot, then I stopped. I told everyone to stop. Well, I was dealing with the platoon commanders. I wasn't running the squads myself. I was dealing with platoon commanders. And stop until we get reorganized. Because when you stop to pick someone up, then all this fire gets concentrated on them. So it took us over an hour to break out. And I was the last one out. I made sure everybody was out. And I got in, got across, and I remember Colonel Lutter standing there. Come here, Lieutenant, come here. I said, sir, I'm busy. I got to get my people taken care of. ran right by them, so I could get my people set in, because they're still taking our mortar fire. And so I got everybody, the gunny. Well, the main thing was I needed to get accountability. When the gunny came up to me and said, all accounted for, oh, God. Whew. That was a weight off my chest. And then I reported a Colonel letter. And he shook my hand. And he said, you did one hell of a job. And he says, first time you and I ever met, I had my concerns because I didn't know you. You hadn't trained under me. You didn't know the way 27 did things. But, you came through it all. And he said, we're going to talk about your radio procedure later. I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. He never did, though. He never did. I think he was pulling my chain. But, you got to do what you got to do. And so anyhow, we had a resupply. We're out, we don't have much resupply, much ammunition, so we had to juggle it with 2.7. And I remember the gunny sitting down with me, and we started looking at supply, and then we had to write in our little book who got wounded and who was killed, and that was pretty emotional. That's pretty emotional. Knowing that your decision made some of this, but if they had done what they did, we might not have been successful, If the tackle doesn't throw the right block, the hole's never going to open up, and the quarterback can't run through it. So you have to look beyond that, and you can't let it eat at you. You got to look at. Someone asked me about how many injured and how many killed. I saved 132 lives. That's the most important part. And the next day, General Platt landed, the task force commander, and had a discussion with me, asked me what. So we called up on this little knoll inside the village, Kifu, and he asked me, tell me what happened. Where were you? Where were you? Where was this guy? Was I? And I told him the best I could remember. And then we mounted up to go back to Route 1, towards Route 1, and I still was the rear element, security for the battalion. And we get down to Route 1, and 2.7 went this way and got on trucks to go to Chulai, and I went this way to get on trucks to go back to the Dang area. And as I'm getting on getting my troops loaded, we're getting shot at from this village. There's a sniper in the village. And so my guys are tired. I mean, they've been awake for over 24 hours. And they get much sleep the second. They've been probably awake 48 hours. And the emotional and tired and not having eaten and probably dehydrated, they just like this on the trucks. I ran up there to find out what was going on, and someone says, there's a sniper in that hut over there. Well, there was an Ontos with 106 rifles on it. There's 6 106 rifles on an Ontos. It had been the convoy security coming down from Da Nang. And so I jumped up on that Ontos, and I told the sergeant, see that hut? Level it. He did 2 rounds. Blew it apart. Okay? The sniper round started. With that, Colonel Utter comes running up. What's going on? What's going on? And I told him what had happened, and I told him what I did. He says, once again, you made a good decision. We saluted. He went that way, and I got on a truck and started towards Da Nang. Well, it was late in the afternoon. We're never going to get there. There was a landing or logistics support area halfway up there. And so we went in there. I had the truck circle, like a circle of wagons, and I put my people underneath all the trucks. And we were really inside their security. So I told everybody, you're not on watch, get some sleep. I crawl under one, and I'm dead to the world. All of a sudden, someone's pulling on my boot. So I come out, half asleep, and this a Navy captain says, started questioning me about what I had done in the village there. He says, we got a lieutenant that brought down the convoy that's charged you with using excessive force and killing civilians. And I said to this captain, if you want to court-martial me, do it in the morning. I'm going to sleep. Back under I went. A while later, someone's pulling on my boot. I come up out of there swinging. It's a lieutenant colonel. You know, I realized that I better not deck this guy. And he says, Lieutenant, I want you to come down to the headquarters with me. There's a bunch of senior officers that got some questions for you. I think you're going to get a Sunday school medal out of this. So I went down to their, headquarters, and sat. And there were some colonels in there, and they asked me a lot of questions. And they had people writing stuff, and then I went back to bed, and it's light got up, got everybody up, got them fed some chow, and we got everyone loaded, and with that a Jeep comes in, and it's a captain that 9th Marines have sent down, an infantry captain, to take over the company. So I'm relieved of command. Needless to say, I thought they could have waited till I got them back to Da Nang. I led them through a lot of fighting, but anyhow, turned it over. At least I got a Jeep. He got one of the trucks, and I took the Jeep that he came down in and followed the convoy. And when they're coming up, the hotel company went this way to their area, and I went down into Echo Battery, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines. First thing that happened is I took a shower, shaved, and I think they took me to the hospital. I had some blisters, immersion foot, and then I slept for about 24 hours. I don't know if I slept for 24 hours or they took me to the hospital after that. I don't remember. But I remember walking in the mess tent to get a cup of coffee, and the battery commander says, "Did you get the news?" I said, "What news, sir?" He says, "Well, General Walt's office called last night." General Walt was the commanding general of 3rd Division. He's recommending you for the Medal of Honor. I dropped my coffee cup. I dropped the damn coffee cup. I couldn't believe it. I was lucky to be alive. That's the reward I wanted. I got a call on Valentine's Day, 1967, saying that I was to report to the White House on the 27th of February to receive the Medal of Honor. And then, of course, Headquarters of the Marine Corps started coordinating. Don't say anything. Can't say anything to anybody until, back then they used to announce the president's schedule every morning. And that's when they wanted this to come out. They didn't want it to come out beforehand. You could tell those people that you're inviting, your family and stuff, but tell them they're closed mouth. Well, one of my congressmen talked about it, so it got out. So it was not a secret. But I flew back, and then I find out, this is interesting. My ceremony is going to be at Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C., not the White House. And so what's this? I said, well, when your award came through, the White House said, we're not having any awards or any recognition or any mention of the Vietnam, because the press was on them on this. And so I'm told this now, that General Green, our commandant, said to the White House, he earned it. It's going to be presented, and if you won't do it, I'll do it. Thinking that they would back off. They didn't. So I was decorated at Marine Barracks, Washington, D.C., in the band hall. And the reason we were in the band hall, it was in the 20s outside, and the band couldn't play. And I was decorated by the Secretary of the Navy, Paul Nitze, the Honorable Paul Nitze. And it was all Marine ceremony. And as a matter of fact, Chuck Robb, who went on to be governor and senator, was the parade adjutant.
Let me ask you a question about the medal. Some recipients have said they see it as a burden, that it reminds them of one of the worst days in in their life. Others see it as a way to make sure that the sacrifice of those in that combat is never forgotten. How do you look at it?
Well, I look at it, it is the metal of America. It stands for the metal of America. And I look at it, it's a platform for me to stand up and talk about leadership. If I didn't have this medal, I wouldn't be sitting here today. That's the way I look at it. It's an avenue. It's harder to wear than it was to earn. And I've been wearing it now for over 60 years.